So there are several ships now that have managed to get through the Strait of Hormuz and they're carrying LPG and headed towards India. Two of them have already crossed the strait and they're safely expected to dock in India. There are six more on the way. This is very good news for India diplomatically and, of course, for our energy security. But the question that we have to ask is, will these ships solve the problem? How much LPG is on these ships and how much of the problem can they actually help us with? We'll have to break down everything that's happening so far. So before we get to that, I want to ask you one more time to like, share, and subscribe to this information. Also, sign up for our membership. We've introduced now a news capsule, so sort of a 9 p.m. news bulletin that we put out on YouTube and on Instagram only for our members. The idea is to curate, fact check, and put out information in the most calm way possible so you can very quickly, in less than 10 minutes, know that's going on in the world that's of value to you. So do give it a listen. Let me know what you think. And of course, sign up for our membership because it really helps us do a better job for you. Let's get straight to what is happening so far. Now, in the last few days, we know that LPG supplies to commercial users have been slowed down. Restaurants, hotels, factory kitchens, food businesses have been complaining. Hotel associations have also complained. And this is because shipments of LPG from the Gulf have been disrupted because of the Strait of Hormuz, which we've talked so much about, the narrow waterway through which most of these ships pass. Now, a huge percentage of the world's oil passes through this corridor. But for India, what is particularly important for us is LPG or cooking gas. Now, what has happened recently? The government says relief is on the way. Two LPG tankers carrying 92,700 tons of LPG have successfully crossed the strait and they have reached India. One of them is already at Mundra port in Gujarat. The other one is expected to dock shortly. Several more LPG carriers are on their way, waiting for safe passage. Officials say 6 additional ships will be part of the pipeline that's expected to move towards India. This is excellent news. Now, let me first take a look at what this means for diplomacy in India. Now, the safe passage of these ships are being seen as a diplomatic success because India had a really tightrope walk. New Delhi, you'll know, maintains very good relationships both with Iran and with the United States, so the two are, and Israel. So the opposite ends of this entire war, as well as with the Gulf countries of Saudi Arabia and UAE, who are deeply involved in the current crisis. To ensure that our LPG cargoes actually move safely, India engaged with multiple governments and maritime authorities to ensure that safe passage. In effect, India had to signal neutrality in the conflict and not pick sides, while simultaneously protecting its own energy security, suggesting to Iran that we are still friends, which was a question because of the closeness to Israel and, of course, the tone that Donald Trump was taking in the beginning of this conflict. This is obviously something that India has done delicately but successfully right now. Now, what is the flip side of it? The United States has begun urging several countries, specifically NATO, to send their own warships to escort commercial vehicles or commercial vessels out of that strait, to ensure freedom of navigation through Hormuz, saying that Iran's action is threatening global energy security. So on one hand, Donald Trump has said, no, US has enough oil because they have their own resources, so they're not really dependent on Iran. But they said everybody else should also now send their warships. This is actually a very dicey thing because none of the US's allies, none of the members of NATO have even responded. We understand that British Prime Minister has turned around and said that the UK does not want to be involved in a direct, continuation of this war in any way. Now, if countries like India are able to move their shipment through a combination of diplomacy and neutrality, it weakens Trump's argument that everybody needs to get involved with warships in order to get what they need. So it suggests that Iran is not seeking to completely shut down the strait, but rather to control selectively only the ships of its enemies, so the ships linked to US and to Israel. So for Trump, this creates a strategic dilemma because on one hand, it allows major economies like India to continue to receive energy without getting involved in this conflict. So the good thing for Trump is that if India receives energy, other countries like China receive energy, it means that oil prices will not completely shoot up and there will not be a global oil shock that will damage the world economy and specifically the American economy. So that's one. On the other hand, though, if each country can negotiate their passage individually, it becomes harder for Trump to persuade any of the allies to commit their ships and escalate the conflict with Iran. So actually two sides here for Donald Trump in the message that India has made the move right now to move its ships. So on one hand, global energy flows resume, oil prices stabilize. It's good for an economy like the US. It's good for Donald Trump domestically. So he doesn't have to apologize to his people for rising oil prices. The negative is that the narrative that only a US-led coalition can restore shipping will then get dented. So India has actually scored a win here diplomatically. But the question that we do have to ask is, these 2+6 ships, when they do arrive, how much of the problem will they solve? Let's take a look at what our consumption is. India consumes 33 million tons of LPG every year. So if you do the rough math on it, that's 2.7 million tons every month, or about 90,000 to 100,000 tons every single day. Now remember, the two ships that are coming are carrying 92,000 tons of LPG, which means 1 day's demand for India. So if you have about 6 ships arriving after these two, we'll cover about a week's LPG requirement for the whole country, which means that they will ease some of the pain that we're feeling right now, but it's not a long-term solution. And the reason why this is happening is because India does not make all of its LPG at home. We actually import a large portion of it from Saudi Arabia, Qatar and UAE, all of which comes through the Strait of Hormuz. The shipping route that we know that is currently choked. And because of that conflict, shipping companies are becoming cautious, insurance costs are rising, and that is actually causing more delays. Though I must point out, the other things that the government is doing is prioritizing domestic cylinders first. So the way it goes right now, restaurants, industrial kitchens, food services, factories, they are facing reduced supply in order to make sure that the Indian household does not face a problem. But from reports that we're seeing on the ground, people are still being made to wait for hours and hours to get a replacement cylinder. So the things that the government has done is, one, ensured that cargoes are moving through the strait the best they can. Second, domestic LPG production is being increased. So they have incentivized domestic producers like Adani and others to produce more LPG and less gas for, say, the fertilizer industry or the tea packing industry or any other industry. Focus first on cooking gas. Third, commercial users are being discouraged in order to prioritize households. So that is really so what we're doing effectively is managing the resources that are available to us, but the truth is we depend heavily on exports, and that puts us in a tight spot when it comes to energy security. I must also remind you that in the past decade, India's demand for LPG has actually expanded because of the Ujjwala Yojana. So the Ujjwala Yojana brought millions of households under the cooking fuel gamut. It was a major achievement. But what it did was drastically increase our demand without perhaps increasing our production to the same level, which is why we rely so much on imports. And when you rely so much on imports, any activity at the other end of the world can affect you, as it is doing right now. So if we go back to the first question that we're asking at the beginning of this episode, the LPG ships heading to India will not solve our shortage. So it's not like these ships will dock and now the problem is over. It might ease the pain for some time, but the shortage will continue until that strait is fully opened and until we go back to normal supply. Also, what it does is it highlights the fact that we don't have energy security on cooking gas. Cooking gas is an essential service. It's not something that we can negotiate with. So this is something that the country in the long term or the medium term, when this is over, needs to figure out immediately. And of course, while these ships will buy India some time, what this war is actually doing is putting all of our diplomats and our foreign affairs experts on their toes, because this is a very sensitive and, like I said, a delicate situation to navigate diplomatically. We'll have to see, of course, how Donald Trump reacts to this, because he was, like I said, hoping some of his allies will respond to him, but none of them have responded to him right now. Global forces will end up shaping something out of what they decide to do, but the impact's going to be felt on our dinner tables and in our kitchens, because it will decide whether or not we have cooking gas to actually put dinner on the table. So it's a delicate situation. It is a difficult situation. We have, as a country, managed a win, but it's not a win that solves the problem. Leave me a comment in the comment section on what you think of this, and do check out our members only bulletin and let me know what you think.